Hey there. Tonight we're traveling to a place where the earth meets the sky, where mountains rise so high they touch the heavens themselves, and where one figure stands eternal, bearing a burden no mortal could imagine. You'll drift through the complete story of Atlas, from his birth among the mighty Titans, through the thunder of war and the weight of endless punishment, to the stars his daughters became, and the mountains that still bear his name. You'll meet a being of immense strength and profound wisdom, condemned to hold up the celestial sphere for all eternity. You'll witness his role in the greatest war the cosmos had ever seen, his encounters with heroes who dared approach the edge of the world, and the legacy that echoes through every atlas, every constellation, every mountain range that reaches towards the infinite sky. If this kind of storytelling helps you rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it actually brings you peace. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's strangely comforting to know who else is out there, falling asleep to the same ancient stories. So settle in. Let the weight of the world fade away. Let the myths wash over you like waves against an eternal shore. And let's begin at the very beginning, in a time before time had fully learned to measure itself. The dawn of the Titans. Before there was Atlas, before there were heroes or monsters or even the Olympian gods who would one day rule from their marble halls, there was only the vast and formless chaos. Not the messy, noisy kind, but something far older, a pregnant emptiness waiting to give birth to everything. From this primordial void emerged the first beings. Gaia, the earth herself, solid and eternal, the foundation upon which all things would eventually stand. Uranus, the sky, vast and star-scattered, stretching above Gaia like a canopy of infinite night. And between them, or perhaps from them, came the first children of creation. Gaia and Uranus's union was not one of tenderness, but of cosmic necessity, and from it came 12 children, enormous and powerful, beings who would come to be called the Titans. They were neither fully God nor fully elemental force, but something in between, raw power given form and consciousness. Among these 12 was Iapetus, sometimes called the Piercer, though whether this name referred to his nature or his actions remains lost to the depths of time. Iapetus was one of the 4 pillars of creation, along with his brothers Caius, Creus, and Hyperion, each stationed at one of the 4 corners of the earth to hold the heavens in place. Or so some stories tell it. Others simply note that Iapetus was there at the beginning, solid and enduring as stone. Iapetus took as his wife an Oceanid named Clymene, though some accounts name her Asia instead, suggesting they may have been the same, being known by different names in different lands. The Oceanids were the 3,000 daughters of Oceanus and Tethys, the Titans who embodied the great river that encircled the world. Clymene was one of these water nymphs, graceful and flowing, a curious match for the solid, earthbound Iapetus. From their union came 4 sons, and it is here that our story truly begins, for among these 4 was Atlas. The brothers were a study in contrasts, each embodying a different aspect of what it meant to be a thinking, striving being. There was Prometheus, whose name meant forethought, blessed or perhaps cursed with the ability to see what would come, to plan and scheme and think 3 steps ahead of even the gods. There was Epimetheus, afterthought, who acted first and considered consequences only when it was far too late. There was Menoetius, violent and hubristic, quick to anger and quicker to fight. And there was Atlas, the one who would endure. The meaning of Atlas's name is disputed even now. Some say it comes from the Greek word meaning to bear or to suffer, which would prove grimly appropriate. Others suggest it means enduring, steadfast, the one who holds firm when all else crumbles. Still others insist the name is older than Greek, pre-Hellenic, from some forgotten language that existed before the people who would tell these stories even arrived on those rocky shores. Whatever the etymology, Atlas was born with certain gifts. He was the strongest of his brothers, though Menoetius might have contested that claim before his fall. He was possessed of a sharp and curious mind, always watching the wheeling stars, always noting the patterns in the movement of the celestial sphere. While other titans concerned themselves with the immediate, with power and territory and the satisfaction of divine appetites, Atlas studied the heavens themselves. He learned to read the movements of the stars, to predict the turning of the seasons by the rising and setting of constellations. He understood the celestial sphere as no one else did, could calculate its movements, anticipate its dances. Some stories credit him with inventing astronomy itself, with being the first to map the heavens and understand that there was an order to the chaos overhead, patterns that repeated, rhythms that could be learned. He grew to enormous size, as all titans did, towering above the landscape like a living mountain. His strength was legendary even among his kind. It was said he could move mountains with his hands, that he could wrestle with the earth itself and win. And yet, for all his might, there was something else about Atlas, something that separated him from his more impulsive siblings. Atlas thought before he acted. He planned. He considered consequences, not with the foresight of Prometheus perhaps, but with a soldier's careful assessment of terrain and tactics. When he moved, it was with purpose. When he struck, it was with precision. The world in those early days was strange and malleable, not yet settled into its final form. The Titans shaped it as they pleased, carving valleys with their footsteps, raising mountains with their hands. Time moved differently then, slower or faster depending on who was measuring it, and the boundaries between earth and sky and sea were not as fixed as they would later become. Atlas dwelt in the far west, at the very edge of the world, where the sun set each evening and the stars seemed to rise directly from the ocean. This was his territory, his domain, and he kept watch over it with the patience of stone and the awareness of a being who understood how the cosmos functioned. He took wives, as was the custom of divine beings in those days. The Oceanid Pleione became his consort, daughter of Oceanus and Tethys, bringing with her the grace and fluidity of water to balance his solid, earthbound nature. Another Oceanid, Athra, also bore him children. And there was Hesperis, the personification of evening itself, who some say was his wife and others say was merely a close companion. From these unions came Atlas's children, and oh, what children they were. 7 daughters by Pleione, who would come to be called the Pleiades, each one beautiful enough to catch the eye of gods. More daughters by Aethra, the Hyades, who would weep rain for all eternity. A son, Hyas, doomed to fall young. And 3 daughters by Hesperis, if she indeed was their mother, the Hesperides, guardians of a garden at the world's edge where golden apples grew. Atlas loved his daughters with the fierce protective instinct of a father who knew too well how dangerous the world could be. He taught them what he could, showed them the stars, explained the movements of the heavens. The Hesperides he stationed in their garden, a sacred place where the boundaries of the world grew thin and magic pooled like morning dew. But fatherhood was only one aspect of Atlas's existence during those golden years of Titan rule. He was also a warrior, a general, a being of such strength and tactical brilliance that when war finally came, there was never any question about who would lead the forces against the rising Olympians. That war, the Titanomachy, would change everything. The family of Iapetus. To understand Atlas, one must first understand his brothers, for they were bound together by blood and fate, and their choices would ripple across the cosmos for eternity. Prometheus was the eldest, or perhaps the cleverest, which in a family of Titans amounted to much the same thing. His name, forethought, was both gift and curse. He could see what was coming, could trace the threads of cause and effect forward into the murky future, and this knowledge weighed on him differently than any physical burden. Even as a young Titan, Prometheus was different from his brothers. While Menœtius raged and fought for the pure joy of violence, while Atlas studied the stars and trained his body for war, while Epimetheus simply existed in the moment without thought for tomorrow. Prometheus plotted and planned and saw. He knew long before it happened that the reign of the Titans was not eternal. He saw the pattern in how Uranus had fallen to Cronus, how son inevitably rose against father, how each generation supplanted the last. And he saw that Cronus's children, those Olympians imprisoned and then freed, those young gods burning with righteous fury, would not accept defeat. So Prometheus made his choice early, quietly. He would side with Zeus and the Olympians when the war came, not out of love for them, but out of cold calculation. The future belonged to Zeus, and Prometheus preferred to be on the winning side. Epimetheus, as was his nature, made no choice at all. He simply waited to see what would happen, acting only when forced to act, deciding only when decision could no longer be avoided. Some accounts say he remained neutral during the war, neither helping the Titans nor joining the Olympians, simply watching as his family tore itself apart. Menœtius, violent and proud, never hesitated. The Titans were his people, his generation, his kin. When Cronus called for warriors to stand against the upstart Olympians, Menœtius was among the first to answer, eager for battle, hungry for the clash of Titans against gods. And Atlas? Atlas stood with his brother Menœtius and with the Titans who had raised him. Not out of blind loyalty, not out of failure to see that the cause might be doomed, but out of duty. These were his people. This was his generation. And when they called him to lead their armies, he answered. The relationship between the four brothers was complex, layered with love and disagreement and the particular tension that comes from family members who have chosen different paths. Prometheus tried to warn them, tried to explain what he foresaw, but prophecy is a thankless gift. No one wants to hear that their cause is lost before the first blow is struck. Atlas respected his brother's gift even as he ignored his warnings. They spoke before the war, in the strange way that brothers who love each other but disagree profoundly often speak, with careful words and unspoken understanding, with acknowledgement that after this things would never be the same. Menœtius was simply angry, seeing Prometheus's choice as betrayal pure and simple. How could he abandon his own kind? How could he side with these children, these Olympians who had never shaped a mountain or guided a river or held dominion over anything more than their own ambitions? Epimetheus, characteristically, had no strong opinion until much later, when the consequences were already unfolding. The four brothers had been close once, in the early days before choices and war and cosmic consequence drove them apart. They had explored the young world together, testing their strength against mountains, racing across continents, learning what it meant to be Titans, to be beings of such immense power that the earth itself responded to their presence. Atlas had always been the anchor of the four, the steady one, the brother others turned to when decisions needed to be made. Prometheus was the mind, Menoetius the passion, Epimetheus the one who kept them laughing at themselves. But Atlas was the foundation, solid and unshakable, or so it seemed. Their father, Iapetus, watched his sons diverge with the particular pain that comes from seeing one's children make irrevocable choices. Iapetus himself would side with Cronus and the Titans, standing with his generation as Atlas would, and he would pay dearly for that loyalty. But before the war, before everything changed, there were still moments of family unity. They gathered sometimes in the far west, at Atlas's domain, where the sun set each evening in a blaze of gold and crimson. Prometheus would speak of what he foresaw, carefully, trying not to reveal too much, trying not to burden his brothers with knowledge they couldn't use. Menoetius would boast of battles yet to come, of the glory they would win, of how these upstart Olympians would learn their place. Epimetheus would simply enjoy the moment, the presence of his brothers, the warmth of family before winter came. And Atlas would watch the stars wheel overhead and say little. He was not given to grand pronouncements or emotional displays. He listened, he considered, he made his calculations. And when the time came, he would do what he believed was right, consequences be damned. The brothers had different relationships with their father as well. Iapetus was stern, ancient, a being from the very dawn of creation. He loved his sons in the distant way of Titans, more like geological forces than individuals. Prometheus, he was wary of, sensing that his son's mind worked in ways even he couldn't quite follow. Menoetius he understood, for violence was a simpler thing. Epimetheus puzzled him, for how could a being not think ahead? And Atlas he trusted, for Atlas was strong and solid and reliable. "You will lead them," Iapetus told Atlas one evening, as war clouds gathered on the horizon, both literal and metaphorical. "When Cronus calls for a general, it will be you." "Prometheus says we will lose," Atlas replied, not arguing, simply stating fact. "Prometheus sees many things. Not all of them come to pass. And if they do?" Iapetus was silent for a long moment. "Then we will face our defeat with the same strength we faced our victories." It was, Atlas reflected later, when he stood beneath an impossible weight at the edge of the world, perhaps the truest thing his father ever said to him. The brothers also interacted with the wider Titan family in different ways. Atlas was respected by his uncles and cousins, known for his strength and his tactical mind. Prometheus was viewed with suspicion, for who could truly trust someone who always knew what you would do before you did it? Menoetius was popular in the way that's straightforward. Warriors often are, admired for his courage even if his wisdom was questionable. Epimetheus was generally liked but not taken seriously. When Cronus called his cousins and nephews to council, when he laid out his plan to hold his kingdom against his own children, Atlas listened carefully. The Olympians were formidable, yes. Zeus commanded the lightning. Poseidon could shake the earth and raise the seas. Hades walked in shadows and knew secrets that had never seen light. But they were young, untested, and the Titans had the advantage of experience, of established power, of controlling the very foundations of the world. "We need a general," Cronus said, his voice like grinding stone. "Someone who understands strategy as well as strength. Someone the troops will follow." Eyes turned to Atlas. Some expected him to volunteer. Others simply assumed he would be chosen whether he volunteered or not. "I will lead them," Atlas said quietly. Not because he wanted to, not because he thought they would win, but because someone had to, and if it was to be done, it should be done well. Prometheus, present at the council but silent, met his brother's eyes across the room. Something passed between them, acknowledgement perhaps, or farewell, or simply the recognition that the world was about to change in ways neither could prevent. "So be it," Cronus said, and Atlas felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders, like the first few flakes of an avalanche that would not stop. The Golden Age. Before the war, there was peace, or at least something that looked like peace if one did not examine it too closely. The Titans ruled the cosmos, and under their reign the world existed in what would later be called the Golden Age. It was not called golden because everything was perfect, but because it was simple. Humans, newly created by Prometheus and Epimetheus from clay and divine breath, lived without the troubles that would later plague them. Death came gently, like sleep. Disease was unknown. The earth gave its bounty freely, requiring no painful labor to extract food from its soil. Atlas watched this age unfold from his position in the far west. His domain was where the day ended and night began, where the sun god Helios descended each evening to rest before his journey through the underworld back to the eastern horizon. It was a liminal place, threshold territory, and it suited Atlas's nature perfectly. He built no great palaces, erected no monuments to himself. Instead, he created something more subtle and more profound. He built an observatory, a place where he could watch the stars without interruption, track their movements, understand their patterns. It was a circle of standing stones on a high promontory, positioned so precisely that on certain days, sunlight would strike through specific gaps and illuminate specific markers. Here Atlas would stand night after night, tracking constellations, noting the procession of the heavens, understanding that the celestial sphere, vast as it was, operated according to laws as fixed and predictable as any physical law governing the earth below. He was not the only Titan interested in such matters. His uncle Coeus, the Titan of intellect and the celestial axis, shared some of this fascination. They would talk sometimes, two massive beings bent over diagrams scratched in the dirt, discussing the mathematics of orbital mechanics before such terminology existed, working out the principles that governed how the heavens moved. "It's all one thing," Atlas explained once, gesturing at the sky. "The stars, the planets, the sun, the moon, they all follow paths, predictable paths. If you understand the paths, you understand everything. And if you could control the paths," Coeus asked, always pushing towards the philosophical implications, "then you would be controlling creation itself," Atlas replied. "But I don't think that's possible. The paths were set when the world was made. We can observe them, understand them, predict them, but change them? No. Some things are immutable." It was an interesting position for someone who would soon join a war attempting to prevent cosmic change. His daughters would sometimes join him at his observatory. The Pleiades, led by Maia, were particularly interested in their father's work. They would ask questions, trying to understand what their father saw in those distant points of light. "That one," Atlas would say, pointing at a particularly bright star. "That's the North Star, the pivot around which all others turn. If you can find that star, you can never be lost. No matter where you are, no matter how dark the night, that star will show you true north." "But why does it not move like the others?" Maia asked. "Because it sits at the celestial pole," Atlas explained patiently. "Imagine the earth is spinning, like a top. The top has an axis, a point around which it spins. That star sits directly above the Earth's northern axis, so as the Earth turns, that star appears to stay still while all the others wheel around it. Is the Earth really spinning? Another daughter asked, skeptical. It certainly didn't feel like it was moving. Yes, Atlas said with certainty, though it's hard to perceive from its surface. But watch the stars night after night. Watch how they rise and set, and you'll see. The simplest explanation for what we observe is that we're the ones moving, not them. It was a revolutionary idea, though it would be many thousands of years before mortals would fully embrace it. During this golden age, Atlas also perfected his arts of war. He knew peace was temporary. He could see the tensions building at Cronus's court, could see how Cronus looked at his children with suspicion and fear, could see how those children looked back with resentment and barely contained rage. So he trained. He practiced with weapons as tall as oak trees. He sparred with other Titans, learning their styles, their strengths and weaknesses. He studied tactics, war theory, the principles of moving large forces across difficult terrain. He walked the battlefields of minor conflicts, watching how fights unfolded, learning from every victory and defeat. Some thought him paranoid. Others simply thought he enjoyed the discipline of martial training. But Atlas knew what was coming, even without Prometheus's gift of foresight. Patterns existed in social structures just as they existed in the heavens. Sons overthrew fathers, new generations replaced old. It was the way of things. He began to gather allies, carefully, quietly, other Titans who would follow him when the time came, warriors who respected his tactical brilliance, beings of power who preferred clear leadership to Cronus's increasingly erratic commands. Among his closest allies was his brother Menoetius, fierce and loyal, ready to follow Atlas into any battle. Also Oceanus, the Titan of the great river, who controlled access to much of the world's water, and several of the younger Titans, those who saw in Atlas a different kind of leadership than what Cronus offered. "You're building an army," Prometheus observed during one of his infrequent visits. "I'm building a defense," Atlas corrected. "Against what? The inevitable?" "There's no such thing as inevitable," Atlas said, though he did not quite believe it. "Only probable. And probability can be altered by preparation and will." Prometheus smiled sadly. "We'll see, brother. We'll see." The Golden Age was also a time of family for Atlas. His daughters grew, not as mortals grow, but as divine beings mature, becoming more fully themselves, more completely the beings they were meant to be. He taught them what he could, though some lessons they had to learn themselves. The Hesperides, stationed in their garden at the world's edge, learned to tend the golden apples that grew there, gift of Gaia to Hera, on her wedding day. Atlas visited them sometimes, checking on their welfare, ensuring they were safe in their remote location. "Father, why do we guard these apples?" one asked. "What makes them so precious?" "They represent something important," Atlas said. "A promise, a gift. The idea that some things are so valuable they must be protected, watched over, kept safe from those who would misuse them. And what would happen if someone stole them?" Atlas's face was grim. "Then we would learn whether promises mean anything at all." It was prophetic, though he didn't know it yet. The Pleiades, meanwhile, had caught the attention of various gods and Titans, much to Atlas's protective dismay. They were beautiful, his daughters, graceful and clever and possessed of their own powers. But beauty was dangerous in a world where powerful beings took what they desired. "Stay close," he told them. "Stay together. Look after one another. The world is more dangerous than you know." They promised they would, and they meant it at the time. But promises made in peacetime often falter when tested by reality. As the Golden Age waned and tensions mounted, Atlas found himself spending more and more time at his observatory, watching the stars wheel overhead, perhaps seeking in their fixed and predictable patterns some comfort against the chaos he sensed approaching. The stars, at least, did not deceive. They rose when they were supposed to rise. They set when they were meant to set. They followed their ordained paths without deviation or doubt. If only the same could be said of gods and titans, Atlas thought. If only beings of power could be as reliable as the distant lights they claimed to rule. But that was not the nature of consciousness, of beings who could choose and change and decide. Free will, Atlas had come to understand, was the great variable in any equation, the factor that made prediction impossible, and planning an exercise in managing probability rather than certainty. The stars did not have free will. They moved according to fixed laws, predictable and eternal. Everything else Atlas knew was chaos waiting to happen. But as storm clouds gathering, the first signs of coming war were subtle, easy to miss if one wasn't watching carefully. But Atlas was always watching. It began with Cronus's increasing paranoia. The king of the Titans had never fully shaken the prophecy that one of his children would overthrow him, despite having swallowed them all to prevent exactly that fate. Now those children were free, grown, powerful, and gathering allies. Cronus called more frequent councils, demanded more reports, questioned everything. His rule, once relatively stable, became increasingly erratic. He saw plots where none existed and missed real threats while chasing shadows. Atlas attended these councils and said little. He watched, listened, assessed, and what he saw troubled him deeply. The Olympians were organizing, Zeus had taken command, and whatever else one might say about the god of thunder, he understood leadership. He was gathering not just his siblings but other allies. The Cyclopes, forgers of divine weapons, the Hecatonkaias, 100-handed giants of terrible power, beings who had been imprisoned by Uranus and then by Cronus, beings who had scores to settle. "We should strike first," Menetius urged at one council. "Hit them before they're ready, before their forces are fully assembled." "No," Atlas said quietly. "That would be a mistake." "Why? We have the advantage now." "Do we?" Atlas asked. "They're consolidating in Thessaly, in territory that favors defense. If we attack them there, we'll be fighting uphill, literally and figuratively. Better to let them come to us, meet them on ground of our choosing." "And if they don't come?" Cronus demanded. "They will," Atlas said with certainty. "Zeus doesn't want coexistence. He wants dominion. He won't be content to rule half the world, so he'll come. And when he does, we'll be ready." It was sound, tactical advice, but it also bought time, and time was something Atlas was increasingly aware they didn't have enough of. He began moving forces, positioning Titan armies at strategic locations. Mount Othrys, the Titan stronghold, became the center of military operations. Atlas established supply lines, communication networks, fallback positions. He planned as if he expected to win, because one had to plan that way even if Prometheus's dark prophecies whispered otherwise. Prometheus himself had largely withdrawn from Titan society at this point. He stayed neutral in councils, offered no advice, made no commitments. It was as clear a statement of his position as any words could have been. Atlas met with him one last time before lines were irrevocably drawn. They met at dawn, on a high peak between Titan and Olympian territory, neutral ground in a world that was rapidly running out of neutral anything. "You could still choose differently," Prometheus said without preamble. No, Atlas replied, I couldn't, even knowing how it ends. You see one possible future, Atlas said. Not the only future. Maybe we win. Maybe your visions are wrong. My visions are never wrong, Prometheus said. Not with arrogance, but with the weariness of one who has seen too much. Misinterpreted sometimes. Incomplete, perhaps, but never wrong. Then why are we having this conversation? Prometheus was silent for a long moment. Because you're my brother, he finally said. And I wanted to see you one more time before everything changes. Atlas felt something twist in his chest, an emotion he didn't quite have a name for. We'll meet again, he said. On the battlefield or after. Brothers don't stop being brothers just because they choose different sides in a war, don't they? Prometheus asked softly. It was a question neither of them could answer. They talked a while longer about nothing important, about everything that mattered. Family, memories, the early days before choice and consequence had driven them apart. And then, as the sun climbed higher and the moment stretched too long, they said goodbye. Atlas watched his brother walk away, heading toward Olympian territory, towards Zeus and the future, and he turned back toward Othrys, toward Cronus and duty and the past. The gathering storm finally broke when Zeus sent an ultimatum: surrender now, or face war. The Titans had 3 days to respond. Cronus, predictably, responded with defiance. The Titans would never bow to upstart children, would never surrender the world they had shaped and ruled since its beginning. Atlas had expected nothing less, but he had hoped for something more, some wisdom, some acknowledgement that this war might not be as easily won as Cronus seemed to think. We're committing to total war, Atlas told his assembled commanders. This won't be a quick conflict. Zeus has powerful allies, divine weapons, and the advantage of nothing to lose. We're fighting to maintain what we have. He's fighting to gain everything. That makes him dangerous. But we're stronger, one commander protested. Are we? Atlas asked. We're older, yes, more experienced, but they're hungry, desperate, and convinced of their own righteousness. Never underestimate an enemy who believes he's fighting for a just cause. He laid out his strategy: defensive positions, strategic retreats when necessary, conservation of forces, fighting smart rather than proud. Menoetius hated it. You're planning to lose, slowly. I'm planning to not lose quickly, Atlas corrected. There's a difference. But Cronus approved, or seemed to, and so Atlas began moving his pieces across the board, positioning armies, securing strong points, preparing for a war he hoped to win and feared he would not. The last days of peace were strange and tense. Everyone knew what was coming, but no one quite wanted to be the one to start it. So they waited, armies massed on both sides, power building like thunderheads before a storm. Atlas spent those final days checking on his daughters, saying goodbyes that he didn't frame as goodbyes because acknowledging what they were would make them too final. Be safe, he told the Hesperides. Stay in your garden, no matter what happens, no matter who comes to your door, stay safe. Will you be safe? They asked. I'll be careful, he said, which wasn't the same thing at all. To the Pleiades, look after each other, look after your mother, and remember, no matter what happens, I love you. They looked at him with worried eyes, these daughters who were too young to have lived through war, too innocent to fully understand what was coming. We'll see you after, Maya said with the confidence of youth that cannot yet imagine a world where not everything works out. Yes, Atlas agreed, because what else could he say? After. The last night of peace, Atlas stood at his observatory one final time. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal patterns, indifferent to the petty conflicts of beings far below. He traced the constellations, said their names like a prayer or a farewell. "Soon," he told the stars, "I may not be able to watch you anymore, but you'll keep moving, won't you? You'll keep following your paths, whether I'm here to observe them or not." The stars, predictably, did not answer. When dawn came, war came with it, and the age of Titans would never be the same again. The Titanomachy. The war began not with a thunderclap, but with a tremor. Zeus struck first, as Atlas had predicted he would. Not a full assault, but a probing attack. Testing the Titan defenses, looking for weaknesses. Lightning cracked across the sky, and the earth shook as Poseidon demonstrated his power over stone and soil. Atlas's defensive positions held barely. The Olympians were more powerful than anticipated, their weapons more devastating, their coordination better than it had any right to be. "Pull back to secondary positions," Atlas ordered after the first day. "Regroup, reassess." "We're retreating?" Menetius was incredulous. "After one day?" "We're adjusting," Atlas corrected. "Their vanguard is stronger than expected. We need to understand their capabilities before committing our full force." It was the right tactical decision, but it set a tone for the war that would persist. The Titans reacting, responding, always one step behind the aggressive, innovative strategies of the Olympians. The Titanomachy would last 10 years. 10 years of grinding, brutal conflict that tore the world apart and reshaped it in ways that could never be undone. Mountains crumbled, rivers changed their courses. The very fabric of reality strained under the weight of so much divine power, unleashed without restraint. Atlas led the Titan armies with skill and determination, and for a time it seemed his careful strategy might actually work. The Titans held the high ground, had better supply lines, could fall back to fortified positions. The Olympians were forced to assault uphill to take each position one by one, paying in blood for every advance. But Zeus was learning, adapting, and he had an advantage Atlas hadn't fully appreciated: desperation. The Olympians had nothing to fall back to, no kingdom to retreat to. They had to win or die trying, and that made them ferocious in ways the Titans, comfortable in their established power, could not match. The first major battle after the initial skirmishes took place on the plains before Mount Othrys. Atlas had drawn the Olympians out, away from the defensible terrain they'd seized in Thessaly, trying to force a confrontation in open ground where the Titans' superior numbers would tell. The morning of the battle dawned red and ominous, clouds gathering on the horizon like bruises. Atlas stood before his assembled forces, thousands of Titans and their allies, beings of earth and stone and ancient power, and he felt the weight of command pressing down on him in ways that had nothing to do with physical burden. "Hold your formations," he called out, his voice carrying across the assembled army. "Wait for my signal. Let them come to us. Let them tire themselves charging uphill. And when they're exhausted, when they've spent their first fury battering against our shields, then we strike." It was sound strategy, proven strategy, the kind of careful, tactical thinking that had made Atlas such a formidable commander. But it required discipline, patience, qualities not always abundant in beings used to taking what they wanted through sheer power. The Olympians appeared on the horizon like a storm rolling in from the sea. Zeus led them, naturally, flanked by his brothers and sisters, followed by their allies and conscripts. They were fewer in number than the Titans, but they moved with the confidence of beings who believed absolutely in their cause. Atlas watched them approach and made final adjustments to his lines, shifting units to counter the Olympian formation, positioning his strongest warriors where they would do the most good. He led from the front, as was his way, a towering figure in bronze armor that had been forged by Hephaestus before the smith god had sided with the Olympians. The armor bore no decorations, no proud boasts or family crests. It was purely functional, designed to protect and allow movement, reflecting Atlas's practical nature. His weapon was a massive club, carved from the heartwood of an ancient oak and reinforced with bands of bronze. Simple but devastating, and he wielded it with the efficiency of someone who had trained for this moment his entire existence. Every swing was calculated, precise, wasting no motion and delivering maximum force exactly where it was needed. Zeus was there too, gold-haired and crackling with barely contained lightning, younger than Atlas by a generation but no less formidable for it. The god wore armor of silver and gold, and his eyes burned with righteous fury and the absolute certainty that he was on the right side of history. They met in the center of the battlefield, and for a moment everything else seemed to pause. Two commanders, two philosophies, two generations colliding in the space between earth and sky. "Last chance," Zeus called out. "Surrender now. Acknowledge the new order. Join us." "No," Atlas replied simply, and raised his club. The clash of their initial strike sent shockwaves that knocked soldiers on both sides off their feet, created a crater in the earth beneath them, and sent ripples through the air like a stone dropped in still water. The sound was like thunder, if thunder could be solid, if lightning could have weight and substance. "You don't have to do this," Zeus called out over the din of battle. "Stand down, join us. There's no shame in accepting change." "There's shame in abandoning your family," Atlas replied, swinging his club in an arc that would have crushed mountains. Zeus dodged, lightning quick, and sent a bolt crashing into Atlas's chest. It hurt, burned, but Atlas had endured worse. He pressed forward, forcing Zeus to give ground, to retreat step by step before the Titan's relentless advance. But Zeus wasn't alone. Poseidon struck from the side, trident catching Atlas's leg and sending him stumbling. Hades emerged from shadow, helm of invisibility, making him nearly impossible to track. And Athena, grey-eyed and tactical, coordinated their movements with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. Atlas held them off, but barely. He was one Titan against four gods, and even his strength had limits. Menetius charged in to support his brother, and the battle devolved into chaos. Titans and Olympians crashed together like opposing waves, and the sound was like the end of the world. When the dust settled and both sides pulled back to lick their wounds, the battlefield was littered with the fallen. Not dead, for gods and titans were hard to kill permanently, but broken, beaten, removed from the fight. Menetius was among them. He'd fought with his characteristic rage, charging Zeus himself, and had been struck down by a thunderbolt for his hubris. His body lay smoking on the field, and when Atlas went to retrieve him, he found his brother barely conscious. "Did we win?" Menetius managed to ask. "No one won today," Atlas replied grimly. Zeus's punishment for Menetius would come later. For now, there was just the brutality of war, the calculus of casualties, the strategic retreats and tactical advances that characterized every day of this conflict. The war ground on. Seasons turned, years passed. The initial fury of battle gave way to grim determination on both sides. Atlas continued to lead, continued to adapt his strategies, continued to search for some way to turn the tide. But deep down, he was beginning to understand what Prometheus had known from the beginning. They were losing. Not quickly, not dramatically but slowly, inexorably, like a mountain being worn down by wind and rain. The problem was the Cyclopes and their weapons. Zeus's thunderbolt could shatter anything. Poseidon's trident could shake the foundations of the earth. Hades's helm made him undetectable, allowing him to strike from nowhere and vanish before retaliation. "We need to neutralize their advantage," Atlas told Cronus. "Target the weaponsmiths, cut off their supply of divine armaments." But the Cyclopes were too well guarded, and every attempt to reach them failed. Then Zeus freed the Hecatonchires, the 100-handed giants, and everything changed. These beings were primal forces of chaos, each with 50 heads and 100 arms, capable of throwing mountains like other beings through pebbles. Uranus had imprisoned them long ago, fearing their power. Cronus had kept them locked away for the same reason, but Zeus had no such fear, or at least was desperate enough to overlook it. The Hecatonchires joined the Olympian side, and suddenly the Titans were not just fighting a losing battle, but fighting an unwinnable one. Atlas adjusted his strategy again, focusing now not on victory, but on survival, on preserving as many Titans as possible, on making the Olympians pay dearly for every step forward. "We're losing," he told his commanders bluntly. "Accept it. Plan for it. Our objective now is to survive this war in such numbers that we can negotiate terms rather than face total annihilation." Some accused him of defeatism. Cronus, increasingly detached from reality, insisted victory was still possible. But Atlas knew better. He'd seen the patterns, run the calculations, understood that sometimes mathematics was more honest than hope. The final battle came in the 10th year of the war, though no one knew it was final until after it was over. Zeus launched a massive assault, throwing everything he had at Mount Othrys. The Olympians came in waves, supported by the Hecatonchires, who bombarded Titan positions with stone and ice and pure destructive force. Atlas rallied his forces for one last stand. If they were going to fall, they would fall fighting, would make the Olympians remember the strength of the generation they overthrew. He fought like a being possessed, his club rising and falling like a smith's hammer, each strike crushing enemies or shattering weapons or clearing space for his soldiers to regroup. Menetius recovered enough to rejoin the battle, fought at his side, and for a brief moment it was like the old days, like the early conflicts when it seemed they might actually win. But Menetius's luck ran out. He charged Zeus one last time, driven by pride and rage and the refusal to accept defeat. Zeus met him with a bolt of lightning so powerful it lit up the sky like a second sun, and Menetius fell. This time he wouldn't get up again. Zeus cast his body into Tartarus, the deepest pit of the underworld, and there Menetius would remain, imprisoned for his defiance. Atlas saw his brother fall and felt something break inside himself. Not his will, not his determination, but something deeper, the certainty that family would endure, the belief that duty and strength would be enough. The Titan lines collapsed after that. Without Menetius's fury and Atlas's ability to be everywhere at once, the defense couldn't hold. Titans surrendered or fled or were captured. And Atlas, standing alone amid the ruins of Mount Othrys, finally laid down his weapon. Zeus approached him carefully, surrounded by his siblings, aware that even in defeat, Atlas was dangerous. "It's over," Zeus said. "Yes," Atlas agreed quietly. "It's over. You fought well, better than I expected. Not well enough." Zeus studied the Titan who had led the armies against him for 10 years, this being who had nearly managed to hold off the inevitable through sheer tactical brilliance and force of will. "You could have won," Zeus said, "if you'd been more ruthless. if you'd sacrificed your forces like pawns, if you'd fought like you had nothing to lose. Then I would have been no better than you, Atlas replied, and there was no heat in it, just exhaustion and truth. Zeus nodded slowly. Perhaps, or perhaps that's why you lost. Come, your sentence awaits. Atlas followed, not because he had any choice, but because running would solve nothing and dying would accomplish even less. He didn't know yet what his punishment would be, didn't know that while his brothers would be simply imprisoned in Tartarus, Zeus had something special in mind for the general who had led the Titan armies, who had come so close to victory, who had made the Olympians pay for every inch of ground with divine blood. He would learn soon enough. The weight of punishment, they took Atlas to the western edge of the world, to the place where he had once dwelt freely, where his observatory stood abandoned now, its carefully placed stones already beginning to show signs of neglect. The place felt wrong now, tainted by defeat, by the presence of his captors, by the knowledge that he would never leave this spot again. Zeus stood before him, flanked by Poseidon and Hades, the three brothers who had overthrown their father and now ruled the cosmos. Behind them stood Athena, grey-eyed and solemn, and Prometheus, who would not meet Atlas's gaze. Atlas, Zeus began, his voice formal, carrying the weight of divine judgment. You led the armies of the Titans against us. You orchestrated a war that killed thousands, destroyed regions, reshaped the very structure of the world. For this, you must be punished. Atlas said nothing. What was there to say? He had known the risks when he chose his side. Your brother Menœtius has been cast into Tartarus for his violence and hubris. Your father Iapetus joins him there, along with most of the Titans who fought against us. They will spend eternity in chains in the deepest pit of the underworld. Still Atlas was silent, waiting. But you, Zeus continued, you are different. You didn't fight from rage or pride. You fought from duty, from loyalty, from a sense of right and wrong, however misguided that sense might have been. And you fought well. You nearly defeated us. Nearly isn't enough, Atlas said quietly. No, Zeus agreed, but it means something nonetheless. So your punishment will be different. Not because it's lighter, but because it's more fitting. He gestured, and Atlas felt something shift in the fabric of reality around them. The sky above them trembled, not metaphorically, but actually shaking. The celestial sphere he had studied for so long, now unstable, unsupported, beginning to drift downward like a curtain falling at the end of a play. During our war, Zeus explained, the pillars that held sky and earth apart were damaged. Some broken, some destroyed entirely. The heavens need support, or they will crash down upon the earth and destroy everything. Atlas looked up at the descending sky and understood. You want me to hold it, he said. Not a question. We need you to hold it, Zeus corrected. The pillars can be rebuilt eventually, but that will take time, perhaps centuries. Until then, something must keep the heavens from falling. And you, Atlas, you who studied the stars more than anyone, you who understand the celestial sphere better than any being alive, you are uniquely suited to this task, and if I refuse, then the sky falls, Zeus said simply, and everything dies. The Titans in Tartarus, the Olympians on our new mountain, mortals, animals, plants, everything, total annihilation. It was, Atlas had to admit, a brilliant punishment. He couldn't refuse without condemning everyone and everything to destruction, including his own daughters, and he couldn't accept without condemning himself to eternal suffering. How long? Atlas asked. Until we decide otherwise, Zeus replied, or forever, whichever comes first. Atlas looked at his brother Prometheus, who still wouldn't meet his eyes. This was what you foresaw, he thought. This moment, this choice that isn't really a choice at all. Then I accept, Atlas said, because what else could he say? Zeus nodded to Poseidon, who raised his trident. The remaining pillars shook and crumbled, and suddenly the full weight of the heavens was crashing downward, and Atlas raised his hands and caught it. The pain was immediate, absolute, all-consuming. Not just the physical weight, though that was enormous, but something else. The sky was not a dead thing, but a living part of the cosmos, filled with stars and planets and space itself, and all of that pressed down upon his shoulders like accusation and obligation and pure, crushing force. His legs buckled, his back bent, every muscle in his body screamed in protest. But he did not fall, he could not fall. If he fell, everything fell with him. So Atlas stood, bent beneath a burden that no being should ever have to carry, and he held up the sky. Zeus watched for a moment, perhaps checking to make sure the punishment would hold, perhaps just savoring his victory. Then he turned and walked away, followed by his siblings, followed by the Olympians who had won the war and would now reshape the world according to their will. Prometheus lingered a moment longer. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, though whether he was apologizing for not warning Atlas more clearly, or for not finding a way to prevent this, Atlas couldn't tell. "Go," Atlas said through gritted teeth. "Just go." Prometheus went. And Atlas was alone at the edge of the world, holding up the sky, beginning an eternity of suffering that would only end if the cosmos itself ended first. The first days were the hardest, though calling them days was strange when time began to blur and distort under the weight of forever. His body adjusted slowly to the impossible burden, muscles and bones and divine flesh reshaping themselves to accommodate what should have been impossible. He learned to lock his knees, to distribute the weight across his frame, to find positions that were slightly less agonizing than others. Not comfortable, never comfortable, but marginally less awful. He learned that he could not sleep, for if he slept, he might falter, and if he faltered, the sky would fall. So he stood in a state of permanent wakefulness, aware of every moment, every breath, every second that ticked by with the weight of the cosmos pressing down upon him. The worst part, he discovered, was not the physical pain, but the isolation. He stood at the edge of the world where no one came, where nothing grew, where even the wind seemed reluctant to visit. His daughters were elsewhere, scattered across the globe, living their lives while he held up the universe. His brothers were imprisoned in Tartarus or serving Zeus. His allies were defeated and scattered. He was alone with the weight and the silence and the slow grinding passage of time that never seemed to move forward, but also never allowed him to escape into numbness. At night, or what he thought of as night, though his position made such distinctions difficult, he would watch the stars. His stars, the ones he had studied for so long, now pressing down upon his shoulders. He could still trace the constellations, still name them, still see the patterns he had once so carefully mapped. But now they felt like accusation. "You understood us," they seemed to say, "and still you chose wrong. You studied us and learned our patterns and thought that made you wise. But wisdom didn't save you, did it?" He tried not to think about his daughters, about whether they knew what had happened to him, about whether they ever looked up at the stable sky and understood that their father was what kept it from crashing down. He tried not to think about Prometheus, about the warning he hadn't heeded, about all the choices that led to this moment standing alone at the world's edge, holding up forever. He tried not to think at all. but thought was all he had left, so it persisted, grinding away like the weight on his shoulders, endless and inescapable and heavy in its own way. Years passed, then decades, then centuries. The weight never lessened, the burden never eased, and Atlas endured because enduring was what he had always done best, even before he had a name that meant endurance. The daughters of Atlas' time moved strangely when you stood in one place holding up the sky. Sometimes it felt like years passed in moments. Other times, seconds stretched into eternities. But eventually, news reached even the isolated prison that was Atlas's post. His daughters survived. His daughters thrived even. And in their own ways, they had become legends. The Pleiades, led by Maya, had caught the attention of the Olympian gods, much as Atlas had feared they would. But what he hadn't anticipated was how much power they would wield in their own right, how their beauty and grace would make them important figures in the new divine order. Maya, his eldest, had been visited by Zeus himself. Not violently, not against her will, but still troubling to Atlas's fatherly instincts. She bore Zeus a son, Hermes, the messenger god, quicksilver and clever, who would become one of the most important Olympians. Electra, another daughter, had also coupled with Zeus and borne him Dardanus, who would found the Trojan royal line. Through her, Atlas's bloodline would flow through some of the greatest heroes and kingdoms of the age to come. Taygeta had Zeus's attention as well, though she tried to escape it by transforming into a doe. Eventually she bore Lacedaemon, founder of Sparta, and through him Atlas's descendants would build one of the most formidable cities in the Greek world. Alcyone and Celaeno had drawn the eye of Poseidon, the god of the sea, and had borne him children who would become heroes and founders in their own right. Only Merope had avoided divine attention, choosing instead to marry a mortal, Sisyphus, and bear him children who would be fully human, vulnerable and brief, but free in ways their divine cousins would never be. The Pleiades had also been transformed, in a way by Zeus's mercy or perhaps his sense of aesthetic. When the giant huntsman Orion pursued them across Boeotia, lusting after their beauty and threatening violence, Zeus had taken pity and turned them into doves, then into stars. Now they shone in the night sky, 7 bright points of light forming a cluster visible from anywhere in the world. They were the Pleiades constellation, and sailors used them to navigate. Farmers used them to mark seasons, and poets sang of their beauty in verses that would last forever. Atlas could see them from his position, pressed against the celestial sphere he held aloft. His daughters, literally part of the sky he bore, their light a constant reminder of what he had lost and what he still held dear. Sometimes he imagined they could see him too, could look down from their stellar perches and know that their father stood below, holding them up, ensuring they never fell. It was a comforting thought, though probably not true. The transformation into stars had likely changed them too much for such mortal, or rather such familial concerns. The Hyades, daughters by Aethra, had faced their own tragedy and transformation. Their brother Hyas, Atlas's only son, had gone hunting and been killed by a lion. The grief of the Hyades had been so profound, their weeping so endless, that Zeus had taken pity on them as well and transformed them into stars. Now they too were a constellation, positioned near their half-sisters the Pleiades, and their rising and setting signalled the coming of rain. Farmers called them the rain-bringers, the weeping sisters, and in their own way they had become as famous as their more celebrated half-siblings. Atlas grieved for Hyas, for the son he would never see become a man, for the continuation of his line that had been cut short. But at least his daughters endured. At least they had been given a kind of immortality, even if it meant being removed from him forever. The Hesperides, his daughters by Hesperus, remained in their garden at the western edge of the world, not far from where Atlas stood. He could almost see their orchard from his post, could catch glimpses of golden gleam when the light hit just right. They tended the garden of Hera, watched over the golden apples that Gaia had given as a wedding gift, and protected them with the help of Ladon, the 100-headed dragon that coiled around the tree. Sometimes Atlas wondered if they knew how close he was, if they ever walked to the edge of their garden and looked out toward the ocean and saw him there, bent and suffering but still standing. He hoped they didn't. He hoped they were safe and happy and undisturbed by knowledge of his fate. But he also hoped they remembered him, remembered the father who had taught them about stars and duty and the importance of protecting precious things. His youngest daughter by Pleione Calypso had been given an island by Zeus, a paradise called Ogygia, where she lived as its nymph queen. Atlas heard stories of how beautiful she had become, how graceful, how lonely. She was lonely because Ogygia was remote, hidden, a place where lost travelers sometimes washed ashore but rarely left. It was, in its way, another kind of prison, though far more beautiful than the exposed rocky shore where Atlas stood. He wondered if she understood that they were not so different, he and she, both isolated, both enduring, both holding their positions because that was what they had been given to do. Some nights, when the wind came from the right direction and the world was very still, Atlas thought he could hear singing, his daughters' voices perhaps, or just the memory of them, echoing across the distances that separated them. They used to sing for him in the golden days before the war, harmonizing in ways that made even other gods stop and listen. Now they sang to the stars, and Atlas held up those stars and listened and remembered when things were different. He thought about them all the time, these children who had been given various fates by the gods who had defeated him, some transformed into stars, some given islands or kingdoms, some married off to gods or heroes or mortals, their lives intertwining with the new order in ways that ensured Atlas's bloodline would persist even as he himself stood frozen at the edge of the world. It was, he reflected, during one particularly difficult century, perhaps the only victory he had left. He had lost the war. He had been punished with an eternal burden, but his children endured, and through them something of him would persist. Their names would be remembered, their stories would be told, and someday, far in the future, when humans looked up at the night sky and saw the Pleiades or the Hyades, they would remember that these were the daughters of Atlas, the Titan who held up the sky. It wasn't much, but it was something. And for a being condemned to stand in one place holding an infinite weight for all eternity, something was better than nothing. He tried to send them messages sometimes, though he had no voice that could carry across such distances. He would think very hard, focusing his will, trying to project his thoughts toward where he knew they were. Stay safe, he would think. Be happy. Remember that I love you. He didn't know if they ever heard him. Probably not. Divine thoughts didn't work that way, and the sky itself interfered with such communications, a wall of distance and physics and sheer cosmic scale. But he sent the thoughts anyway because it gave him something to do besides endure, and because love, he had discovered, didn't require acknowledgement to persist. His daughters had become myths, legends, celestial phenomena, and he had become the one who held them up, literally and metaphorically, bearing their weight along with the weight of everything else, standing eternal and alone and devoted to a duty that never ended. The visit of Heracles. It was Hermes who first told Atlas that his grandson was coming to visit, though visit was perhaps too gentle a word for what Heracles intended. Hermes, bright-eyed and clever, appearing in a flutter of winged sandals and divine light, looked at Atlas with something that might have been pity if gods allowed themselves such simple emotions. "My mother's father," Hermes said with a slight bow, acknowledging the relationship between them. "I bring news." "Hermes," Atlas managed, his voice rough from centuries of disuse. He rarely spoke anymore, having no one to speak to. "What brings the messenger of the gods to this forsaken place?" "A courtesy, perhaps," Hermes replied, "or a warning. My half-brother Heracles is coming. He seeks the golden apples of the Hesperides, and he believes you can help him acquire them." Atlas felt something twist in his chest, the first strong emotion he'd experienced in decades. The apples. His daughter's apples, the treasures they'd been charged with protecting. "Why would I help him?" Atlas asked. "Because," Hermes said carefully, "he's been given this task as one of his labors. King Eurystheus, puppet of Hera, demands it. And Heracles, being Heracles, will find a way to complete it whether you help him or not. Then let him try." "He will try," Hermes agreed. "But it would go easier for everyone, including your daughters, the Hesperides, if you simply cooperated. He's not a bad sort, my brother. A bit simple, perhaps, overly fond of solving problems by hitting them with a club, but his heart is generally in the right place. His heart is with Hera, who hates him, and Eurystheus, who uses him. What kind of sense does that make?" "The sense of someone trying to atone for a terrible crime," Hermes said quietly. "He killed his own children in a fit of madness sent by Hera. These labors are his penance, his way of earning redemption. Even gods can understand the desire for absolution." Atlas said nothing for a long moment, the weight of the sky pressing down as it always did, constant and crushing and inescapable. "What does he want from me?" he finally asked. "Only the apples." "Well, technically, he wants you to get the apples for him. Something about the garden being protected against heroes, but not against you, since you're the father of the guardians. And in exchange?" Hermes smiled slightly. "Ah, that's where it gets interesting. He offers to hold up the sky while you fetch the apples, a temporary reprieve from your burden. A few hours of freedom to stretch your legs, so to speak." It was a trick. Atlas knew it was a trick. Heroes, even ones seeking redemption, were not known for their selflessness. Heracles would want something more, would angle for advantage, would try to leave Atlas worse off than before. But the thought of even temporary freedom, of lowering the weight for just a moment, was almost overwhelming. "When does he arrive?" Atlas asked. "Soon," Hermes replied. "A day, perhaps 2. He's working his way across Libya now, dealing with various obstacles. He freed Prometheus on the way, actually. Your brother is no longer chained to his rock, no longer having his liver eaten by eagles. Zeus allowed it as a reward for some service or prophecy. Prometheus sends his regards, incidentally." Of course he does, Atlas thought. Prometheus, who foresaw everything, who chose the winning side, who was now free while Atlas remained imprisoned. How generous of him to send regards. "Thank you for the warning," Atlas said stiffly. Hermes studied him for a moment, something unreadable in those clever eyes. "For what it's worth, I think your punishment is excessive. But I'm just a messenger. I don't make these decisions." "No," Atlas agreed. "You just deliver their consequences." Hermes had the grace to look uncomfortable, then vanished in a shimmer of divine speed, leaving Atlas alone with the weight and the waiting. Heracles arrived 2 days later, exactly as Hermes had predicted. The hero was everything Atlas had heard and more. Massive, even by divine standards, muscles like boulders, skin bronzed by countless battles, and carrying a club that looked like an entire tree. He wore the hide of the Nemean lion across his shoulders like a cloak, and his eyes were weary in the way of someone who had seen too much and done things he wished he could forget. "Atlas," Heracles called out, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone so large. "I am Heracles, son of Zeus and Alcmene. I've been sent to retrieve the golden apples of the Hesperides." "I know," Atlas said. "Hermes warned me." "Good, that saves time." Heracles looked up at the massive Titan, at the way his back bent under the weight of the sky, at the strain visible in every line of his divine form. "But that looks painful." "It is." "I'm sorry. I know my father can be harsh in his punishments." Atlas almost laughed, though it came out more like a cough. "Your father enjoys his cruelty. He just dresses it up as justice." Heracles didn't argue with that. Instead, he got to the point. "I need those apples. I've been told you can help me get them without angering your daughters or dealing with Ladon. And what do I get in return?" "A rest," Heracles said simply. "I'll hold up the sky while you get the apples. You can stretch, walk around, be free for a few hours. Then we trade back. I take the apples to Eurystheus, and we both get what we want." It sounded reasonable, too reasonable. "How do I know you won't just leave me holding the sky while you escape?" Atlas asked. "Because," Heracles said, and there was something in his voice that made Atlas believe him. "I'm trying to redeem myself. I'm trying to prove I'm more than the violence in my blood, more than the madness here ascends. And leaving you here while I run off with your apples would make me exactly the kind of hero I'm trying not to be." They looked at each other, Titan and hero, separated by generations but united in their understanding of what it meant to bear unbearable burdens. "Fine," Atlas said, "I'll do it. But understand this. If you betray me, if you leave me holding your burden, I will find a way to make you regret it. I may be imprisoned, but I'm not powerless." "I understand," Heracles said. "I wouldn't expect anything less." They worked out the logistics carefully. Atlas would need to explain to Heracles exactly how to stand, how to distribute the weight, how to lock his knees and brace his back. And then, in one smooth motion, they would need to transfer the burden from Atlas's shoulders to Heracles's without letting the sky falter. "Are you ready?" Atlas asked. "As I'll ever be," Heracles replied, positioning himself beneath the celestial sphere, hands raised, muscles tensing in anticipation. "On 3, Atlas said. 1, 2, 3. The transfer was awkward and terrifying, and for one horrible moment Atlas thought the sky would fall, crushing them both. But Heracles was strong, stronger than any mortal had a right to be, and he caught the weight, bearing it down to his own shoulders even as Atlas stepped away. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. For the first time in centuries, Atlas stood upright. No weight pressed down upon him. No cosmic burden bent his spine. He was free, his legs buckled, his back wouldn't straighten properly, warped by centuries of bearing the sky. His muscles screamed in protest at the change, unused to anything except constant strain. But he was free. He took a step, nearly fell, caught himself. Another step, then another. He was walking, actually walking, covering distance, moving through space like a normal being instead of a living pillar frozen at the edge of the world. Behind him he heard Heracles grunt under the weight, heard the hero's knees hit the ground, and then slowly, painfully, push back up. How? Heracles gasped. How did you bear this for so long? You get used to it, Atlas said, though that was a lie. You never got used to it. You just learned to endure. He didn't waste time. Every moment he delayed was another moment Heracles bore a burden not meant for him, another chance for something to go wrong. Atlas ran, or tried to run, his body relearning movement as he went. The garden of the Hesperides wasn't far. He'd been able to see it for centuries, tantalizingly close but impossibly distant, separated by the duty that kept him locked in place. Now he covered that distance in minutes, arriving breathless and overwhelmed at the garden's entrance. Ladon raised his 100 heads at the intrusion, but seeing Atlas, the dragon relaxed. This was no thief or intruder. This was the father, the one who had charged them with protecting this place. Father. The Hesperides emerged from their orchard, beautiful and ageless exactly as he remembered them. Father, is it really you? Only for a moment, Atlas said, his voice breaking. I need the apples, 3 of them, for a hero named Heracles. They didn't question, didn't argue. They simply plucked 3 golden apples from the tree, handling them with the reverence such precious items deserved, and gave them to their father. We didn't know you were so close, one said. If we'd known, we would have visited. It's better you didn't, Atlas said. Better you remember me as I was, not as I've become. He wanted to stay longer, wanted to talk with them, to hear about their lives, to be a father again, even for just a few more moments. But Heracles was suffering, and Atlas had made a deal. He kissed each daughter on the forehead, memorizing their faces, storing this moment against all the lonely centuries to come. Then he turned and ran back, apples clutched carefully in his massive hands. Heracles was on his knees again when Atlas returned, face red with strain, arms shaking with effort. But he had held the sky. He had not let it fall. I have them, Atlas called out. The apples. Our deal is complete. Good, Heracles gasped. Then take this weight back, please. But Atlas paused. He had the apples. He was free, at least for the moment. And standing before him was a hero who would soon be weakened by holding the sky, who couldn't effectively resist or pursue. An idea formed, dark and tempting. You know, Atlas said casually, I could just take these apples to Eurystheus myself. You're busy with the sky at the moment. And I've always wanted to see his kingdom, deliver these treasures personally. Heracles' eyes widened with understanding and growing horror. You're going to leave me here. Why not? Atlas asked. You're strong, you can hold it. And I've held it long enough. More than long enough. Maybe it's your turn. That wasn't the deal. Deals change, Atlas said with a shrug he hadn't been able to perform in centuries. I'm sure you understand. And really, who's going to stop me? Your father, the one who put me here in the first place? I think Zeus will find it amusing, actually. His son taking my place. Heracles was silent for a moment, struggling with the weight and the betrayal. Then he spoke, his voice strained but thoughtful. You're right, he said. I was a fool to think you'd willingly take this back. But before you go, could you help me adjust? Just for a moment. The weight is distributed unevenly on my shoulders. If I could just shift it slightly, I could bear it better. Hold it longer. Surely you remember how that feels, how important proper positioning is for this burden. It was Atlas's turn to hesitate. It was a reasonable request. The sky did need to be properly balanced, and he knew better than anyone how small adjustments could make the difference between bearable agony and unbearable torture. and helping Heracles adjust would only take a moment. Then Atlas could leave, free at last, and let someone else suffer for a change. "Fine," Atlas said, setting the apples down. "I'll help you adjust." But only for a moment. He moved closer, reaching up toward the sky, preparing to lift it slightly so Heracles could shift his position. And Heracles, with a speed that belied his current strain, simply stepped out from under the weight. Atlas caught it automatically, centuries of trained response taking over, arms going up, back bending, legs bracing. The weight slammed down upon his shoulders like it had never left. Crushing, absolute, familiar. He'd been tricked. Heracles, breathing hard but free, picked up the apples and stepped back. "I'm sorry," he said, and he actually sounded sorry. "But I made you a promise, and I keep my promises. You'll get the apples eventually. I'll make sure Athena returns them to your daughters after I complete my labor. But I can't leave you free if it means I'm imprisoned." Atlas stood beneath the weight, bent and trapped and furious, and yet he understood. Prometheus had been right all those years ago. The outcome had been inevitable, not because of the war, not because of Zeus's cruelty, but because Atlas would always choose to bear the burden rather than let everything fall. He couldn't let go. He would never let go. And heroes, clever heroes like Heracles, would always understand that about him. "Go," Atlas said bitterly. "Take the apples, complete your labor, and remember this moment, hero. Remember that redemption has costs and someone always pays." Heracles left, carrying the golden apples toward his destiny, toward eventual godhood and eternal glory. And Atlas stood alone once more, holding up the sky, the brief taste of freedom making his renewed imprisonment almost unbearable. Almost, but not quite, because that was what he did. He endured, said the petrification. The second visitor to disturb Atlas's eternal watch came many years after Heracles, though time had become so blurred that Atlas couldn't say exactly how many years had passed. Days and centuries felt much the same when measured in endless suffering. This visitor was younger, lighter, arriving on winged sandals borrowed from Hermes, carrying a bag that dripped something dark and terrible. "Greetings, Titan," the young man called up. "I am Perseus, son of Zeus and Danae. I seek shelter and hospitality." Atlas looked down at this young hero, this child playing at greatness, and felt nothing but exhaustion. "I offer no hospitality," he said. "I offer nothing to anyone. Leave." "But I am son of Zeus," Perseus insisted, as if that meant something. "Surely you wouldn't refuse the offspring of the king of the gods." "I would, and I do," Atlas replied. "I've met enough children of Zeus to last several eternities. Now go. I want nothing to do with you or your father." He should have been more diplomatic. He knew, even as the words left his mouth, that he was making a mistake. But he was tired, so tired, and the thought of dealing with another of Zeus's progeny, another hero on some quest who might try to trick him or use him, was more than he could bear. Perseus's expression hardened. "I have traveled far. I have slain Medusa, the Gorgon whose gaze turns all to stone. I carry her head in this bag. I came here in peace, asking only for rest. And you, who have lost everything, who stand alone holding a burden you can never put down, you dare to refuse me?" "Yes," Atlas said simply. "I dare. Now leave before I decide you're the kind of annoyance I can deal with even while holding up the sky." It was an empty threat. Atlas's hands were quite literally full, but he hoped the young hero might not realize that. Perseus stood there for a long moment, jaw clenched, pride warring with practicality. Then he made his decision. "You have heard of Medusa," Perseus said, reaching into his bag. "I've heard of many things," Atlas replied, "and I'm unimpressed by most of them." "Then be impressed by this." Perseus pulled out the head. Atlas had one brief moment to see it, to register what he was looking at. Medusa's face, once beautiful if the stories were true, now frozen in death but no less terrible for it. Hair of living serpents, still writhing despite their host's demise. Eyes that had turned countless warriors to stone, that had ended lives with a glance, that held power even in death. And then Atlas met those eyes. The transformation was not instant. It began at his feet, stone creeping up from the earth like rising water, like inevitable consequence, like fate finally catching up. He felt his legs solidify, the divine flesh that had borne the weight of the sky for uncounted centuries turning to granite and marble and mountain. The petrification climbed higher, his torso hardened, his arms became stone still locked in their eternal gesture of holding aloft. His shoulders, bent forever beneath their burden, became peaks. His spine became a ridge, his chest became slopes and valleys, and his head, tilted back to support the heavens, became a summit. But the weight did not lift. Even as his body transformed from divine flesh to mortal stone, the burden remained. The sky did not fall, the heavens stayed in place, supported now not by a living Titan, but by a range of mountains that would forever bear his name. Perseus watched the transformation with mixed feelings, triumph and guilt, warring in his young face. He was a hero. He had overcome a challenge, defeated an obstacle, refused to be denied. But he was also human enough to wonder if perhaps he had been too hasty, too proud, too unwilling to accept a simple refusal from a being who had already suffered more than anyone should have to suffer. "I'm sorry," he said to the mountains that had once been Atlas, "but you should have given me shelter." The mountains did not reply. Mountains rarely do. Perseus left, flying on his borrowed sandals toward new adventures, toward Andromeda and kingship and eventual transformation into a constellation himself. His role in this story was over, a brief moment of intersection between his heroic journey and Atlas's eternal suffering. But for Atlas the story changed but did not end. He was stone now, immovable and unchanging, a physical feature of the landscape rather than a divine being. The Atlas Mountains, they would be called, stretching across the northwestern coast of Africa, marking the place where earth and sky met, where the western edge of the world looked out over endless ocean. His consciousness remained, though. The transformation had changed his form, but not his awareness. He was still Atlas, still bearing the burden, still watching the stars wheel overhead, still enduring. If anything, it was worse. As a Titan, he had been able to shift slightly, to adjust his position minimally, to at least have the illusion of movement. As mountains, he could not move at all. He was locked in place absolutely, frozen in his moment of transformation, holding up the sky for eternity, without even the minimal relief of being able to flex his fingers or shift his weight from foot to foot. But there were small mercies, if one looked for them. He could not speak anymore, could not be tricked by heroes or questioned by gods. He was simply there, enduring, a geographic feature rather than a person, and perhaps that made it easier in some ways. His daughters could visit him now, or at least they could stand at his base, where his feet had become foothills, and know that he was there. The Hesperides garden was not far from his new stone self. They would come sometimes, these daughters who had outlived their transformation into stars or rain, and they, would tend the gardens at his feet, plant flowers in his valleys, sing songs that echoed through his canyons. He couldn't respond, couldn't speak to them, couldn't even let them know he heard them. But he heard them, and it mattered. The world changed around him as the centuries and millennia passed. Kingdoms rose and fell within sight of his peaks. Civilizations bloomed and withered. Humans came and went, eventually settling in his valleys, using his slopes for grazing, mining his foothills for ore, treating him as just another natural feature rather than a titan in eternal bondage. They told stories about him, these humans, myths and legends about the titan who held up the sky, about how he had been turned to stone by Perseus, about how his daughters became stars. The stories changed with each telling, details shifting, meanings transforming, until sometimes even Atlas wasn't sure what was true and what was embellishment. But certain things remained constant. He was Atlas. He held up the sky, and he would continue to do so until the end of the world itself. The irony was not lost on him. He had spent his entire existence studying the heavens, understanding their movements, mapping their paths. And now he would spend eternity holding them up, literally supporting the object of his study and fascination. Perhaps, he reflected during one particularly clear night when stars seemed close enough to touch, that was fitting. You studied the stars long enough, they became part of you. Or you became part of them, the distinction ceased to matter. Birds nested in his ridges, streams ran down his slopes, carved by millennia of rain. Snow capped his highest peaks in winter, and wildflowers bloomed in his meadows in spring. He was no longer separate from the world, but part of it, integrated into the landscape, as fundamental as any natural feature, and still, beneath it all, he was Atlas, changed but not destroyed, transformed but not defeated, enduring, always enduring, because that was what he did best. The mountains stood eternal, holding up the sky, marking the western edge of the world and bearing a name that would never be forgotten. Atlas, the one who endures. Legacy and symbolism. The mountains stood, and the world remembered. Long after the last person who had known Atlas as a living titan passed away, long after the Olympic gods themselves faded from active worship, the name persisted. Atlas, the titan who held up the sky. The story became legend, became myth, became cultural touchstone. Cartographers in the 16th century began collecting maps into books, and one of them, Gerardus Mercator, chose to put an image of Atlas on the cover of his collection, showing the titan bearing a globe. It wasn't quite accurate. Atlas had held the celestial sphere, not the earth, but the symbolism worked. And so a new word entered language. Atlas, meaning a book of maps, a collection of geographic knowledge, bound together like Atlas, bound the heavens to earth. The name spread. Scientists named a vertebra after him, the Atlas bone, the topmost vertebra that holds up the skull, just as the Titan held up the sky. Explorers named oceans after him, the Atlantic, the great sea beyond the pillars of Heracles, the water that touched the mountains that had been his body. Sculptors carved his image over and over. Atlas holding a sphere became one of the most recognizable images in art. Buildings across the world featured Atlantes, male figures used as architectural supports, their bodies straining under the weight of roofs and balconies, echoing forever the Titan's eternal pose. The Farnese Atlas, a Roman copy of a Greek sculpture, showed him bent beneath a celestial globe marked with constellations. art scholars would study it for centuries, using it to understand ancient astronomy, to map how the Greeks viewed the heavens. Atlas had become not just a myth, but a teaching tool, a way to preserve ancient knowledge. His daughter's legacy persisted too. Astronomers charted the Pleiades with ever-increasing precision, noting the 7 bright stars and dozens of dimmer companions. The cluster became important in navigation, in agriculture, in the myths of cultures around the world who saw the same 7 stars and told their own stories about them. The Hyades served a similar purpose, marking the face of Taurus the bull, signaling the coming of rains, standing eternal in the night sky where their grief had placed them. Modern astronomy would reveal that the Pleiades were young stars, hot and blue, born from the same cloud of gas and dust only 100 million years ago. They were siblings, in fact, as well as in myth, bound together by gravity and origin, drifting through space as a unit even as Atlas drifted through time beneath his unchanging burden. The symbolism of Atlas persisted because it spoke to something fundamental in human experience. Everyone has burdens. Everyone carries weight that sometimes feels unbearable. Atlas became the ultimate symbol of endurance, of bearing what must be borne, of standing firm when everything else threatens to collapse. He appeared in philosophy as well as art. Philosophers debated what Atlas represented. Was he a symbol of human suffering, of duty, of the price of rebellion, of the burden of knowledge? All of these and more, depending on who was doing the interpreting. Some saw him as heroic, a figure who sacrificed everything to keep the world from crumbling. Others saw him as tragic, a being punished beyond any reasonable proportion to his crime. Still others saw him as simply functional, a necessary component of cosmic order, no more worthy of pity than any other natural law. The truth, as usual, was probably more complicated than any single interpretation. In literature, Atlas became a shorthand for many things. Someone bearing a great burden was said to carry the weight, like Atlas. Someone studying the stars was following in Atlas's footsteps. Someone punished excessively had received Atlas's fate. Shakespeare referenced him. Milton referenced him. Dante placed him in his Inferno, though not quite in the way the original myths did. Every age reinterpreted Atlas for its own purposes, finding in his story whatever meaning that age needed to find. The Enlightenment saw him as a symbol of reason bearing the weight of superstition. The Romantics saw him as the noble sufferer, beautiful in his endurance. The Victorians saw him as duty personified, standing firm in the face of change. Each generation looked at Atlas and saw themselves, or saw what they aspired to be, or saw what they feared becoming. Scientists named things after him constantly. The strongest of the rocket families in 20th century America was called Atlas. The first vertebra, as mentioned, bore his name. A moon of Saturn was named Atlas, a small satellite shepherding the rings, keeping them in order, appropriate for one who had held the cosmos together. Even in modern times, when few people believe in the literal existence of Titans, Atlas persists. Companies use his image to symbolize strength and reliability. Buildings sport his figure holding up lintels and cornices. The phrase, carrying the weight of the world, remains instantly recognizable, even to those who have never read the myths. The mountains that bore his name became important geopolitically. The Atlas Mountains separated the Mediterranean coast from the Sahara, created distinct climatic zones, hosted diverse ecosystems. Geologists studied their formation, understanding now that they were created by tectonic forces, the collision of continental plates, pressures from below, pushing rock upward. The myths said Atlas had been transformed into mountains. Geology said the mountains had formed from crustal movement. Perhaps both things could be true, in their own ways. Perhaps Atlas's transformation was simply another way of describing the violent forces that created such massive geographic features. The golden apples of the Hesperides became their own symbol, representing forbidden knowledge, precious gifts, the treasures at the world's edge that could only be obtained through great effort and cost. They appeared in art and literature as often as Atlas himself, sometimes more so. Some scholars thought the golden apples might have been based on real fruit, perhaps citrus, which was rare and precious in ancient Greece. Others thought they were purely metaphorical, representing the sun at sunset, gold light glinting off the Western Ocean. Still others argued they symbolized immortality, knowledge, divine favor, or the unattainable perfection that heroes forever sought. The story of Heracles tricking Atlas became a cautionary tale about trust and betrayal, about keeping one's word, about the dangers of letting one's guard down even briefly. It was retold countless times, each version emphasizing different aspects, finding different morals in the same events. And through it all, Atlas endured, as he had always endured, holding up the sky, bearing his burden, standing eternal at the edge of the world. His story became humanity's story. The weight might be different, the scale might vary, but the basic truth remained. Everyone carries something. Everyone has their sky to hold up, their burden to bear, their duty to fulfill. And some, like Atlas, do it alone, at the edge of everything, where no one can see the strain, where the only witnesses are the stars that wheel overhead, indifferent and eternal and impossibly distant. The legacy of Atlas is the legacy of endurance itself, not triumph, not victory, not even justice necessarily, just endurance. The act of continuing, of standing firm, of holding on when letting go would be easier, of bearing what must be borne because someone has to bear it, and you're the one who's there. It's not a happy legacy, but it's a true one, and it persists in maps and art and stars and mountains, in every representation of strength and burden and the terrible, beautiful act of simply continuing to exist under impossible weight. Atlas endures. That's his legacy. That's his truth. And that truth, etched in stone and written in stars, will last as long as the heavens themselves. Closing, so the mountains stand eternal, bent beneath their burden, and the stars wheel overhead in patterns Atlas mapped so long ago. The Pleiades shine in winter skies, 7 sisters watching over a world their father helped to shape, and then was forbidden from walking upon. The Atlantic rolls its waves against shores that never knew his footsteps, and mapmakers thumb through atlases that bear his name without knowing why. Somewhere at the edge of where earth meets sky, where the sun sets each evening and the first stars appear, the burden continues, not as punishment anymore perhaps, but as simple fact. The sky must be held, someone must hold it, and Atlas, transformed from Titan to mountain, from divine being to geographic feature, from person to eternal symbol, continues to do exactly that. His story is not about victory or defeat. It's not about right or wrong, about justice or cruelty, about the legitimacy of old gods versus new. It's about something simpler and more profound. It's about standing when standing is all you can do. It's about bearing weight because someone must bear it. It's about endurance not as a virtue but as a necessity, as the basic act of continuing to exist under conditions that should by all rights be impossible. And in that, Atlas speaks to something universal. Everyone carries weight. Everyone bears burdens. Everyone has their sky to hold up, their duty to fulfill, their place to stand when standing is hard and sitting would be so much easier. Some do it alone, at the edge of everything, where no one sees the strain except the stars. And some, like Atlas, do it forever. If this story helped ease you towards sleep, if these myths brought you some measure of peace, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel, but only if it actually helps. No obligation, no pressure, just an invitation to let me know you're out there, falling asleep to the same ancient stories that have been putting people to rest for thousands of years. Pleasant dreams wherever you are, and may your own burdens feel lighter, at least for tonight. The stars are watching after all. They always are.